haven't had a roof on this thing in a couple of years. I was going to put one on last January when it finally got cold enough, but for whatever reason the roof wouldn't fit anymore. It was like it was too small. And I knew that my Jeep was getting a little older, but I didn't notice it was getting fatter, you know. That and the zippers were torn off, so I had to replace it. Turns out you're supposed to install these roofs when it's warm, but it wouldn't have made any difference if it was warm because, as I said, the zippers were off of it and there's no way to put those back on. So my wife bought me a new roof, and it's a different model, so I'm going to have to replace all the hardware in this, and that's going to be a bear. But we have to do this because we're doing this paleontological expedition in Wyoming, and I have a huge Tetris game for all of the camping gear that I have to stuff into this thing. And putting the roof on is not going to be easy, but at least I have this complicated set of instructions. Alright, let's see what these instructions say. What? What do you know? That worked. I'm glad Thoughts and Prayers works this time around, because otherwise this would have been hours and hours of effort and frustration on my part on a hot day. I don't have a lot of space to put all the stuff that I need. Well, you can definitely tell that I've been driving this thing with no roof on it for 2 years. And I've been told that I'm going to be doing a lot of probably not very fuel efficient driving for a number of days, several miles from the nearest gas station, or tens of miles from the nearest gas station. So as you can see, I've got a couple of 5-gallon jerry cans mounted up in here, just like they used to do back in World War II. So this will give me 10 extra gallons for when I'm out on the, well off the beaten trail. Now, when I was wandering around South Africa, we were drinking 2 liters of water a day that we would have to carry. Well, excuse me, 2 liters, 6 liters a day. And my wife is coming with me on this trip, so I need to have at least one reservoir holding about 60 liters of drinking water. And I'm not going to be able to take this out once it's full up, so I'm going to be running that spigot out of it. Yeah, I hope that'll be enough. Okay, so I have all of this, and I got all of that, and was just about finished with this before my wife brought out that, and I still have my bag to pack. Where is all this going to go? We are finally packed up and on the road, and I cannot drive fast in this thing. We were so overloaded and with these size tires and everything, with being a Jeep anyway, and if you try to go fast, it starts to rattle you to death. It feels a little bit like I'm in a safari vehicle at this point. It was fun. We stopped in a truck stop just before we pulled out of town. It's called a Buc-ee's. It's a Texas thing. They have a truck stop that's like the Walmart of truck stops. It's almost the Disneyland of truck stops. It's just a huge place. And the cashier there, you know, getting some refreshments, whatever, to be on the road, the cashier stops me and says, "Dude, you look really familiar. Have I seen you on Channel 5? And then when he realized who I was, that I was the Satanist who gave the sermon on that episode of Channel 5, he said, "Oh man, you come in here anytime I got you." I guess I had a bit of a fan. So I said to my wife yesterday, I said I'm more excited about this trip than I have been for any of the trips we've taken recently. I mean, I've been to a bunch of places, but I've been more excited about this one than any in a long time, almost since Africa itself. And my wife said, "Yeah, I'm sure the people ready for the 3-hour tour were excited too." So, into foreboding. get out here. We're finally in the field. And thankfully, it's not near as hot as what we were prepared for. It turns out it's a lot hotter back home than it is up here. So it's been actually quite pleasantly nice. Pleasant surprise. I'm here with Dr. Benjamin Berger. He's a paleontologist from the University of what?
Utah State University.
Utah State University in Vernal.
Yeah, we
Utah.
have campuses in Logan, Price. I'm in the Uinta Basin campus, so our main campus is in Logan, Utah.
So I've had the privilege, before the rest of the expedition gets up here, I've had my own personal paleo professor to interrogate as we've been up here at the campsite and wandering around different places in the field. And this is a spectacular area, I think. Wonderful rock formations. It's a fun place to be if you're not trying to work. But then we are trying to find fossils here, and there have been a lot. Unfortunately, almost all of them have been turtles.
Yeah, a lot of fossil turtles.
Yeah, so tell us about this area.
So we're in the Greater Green River Basin. So this was during the Eocene period, which is a period from about 55 million years ago to about 34 million years ago. And it's this particular area in Wyoming was a major basin where lakes would form. So it was internally drained, and so we had all of these lakes that formed. The kind of the famous fossil fish localities that come from Wyoming that include the little Nidia little herringfish. They are found in this lake, in some of the more lake deposits, but we're on the shoreline deposits.
Yeah, if you look around the surrounding topography, you will wonder what he means by shoreline, as we are in a semi-arid desert.
Yeah, so this is back in the day when this was a forested tropical area, and we know that because we have lots of fossils of petrified wood, we have fossils of primates, we have fossils of all sorts of different types of mammals and things like crocodiles and alligators and fossil turtles.
Yeah, crocodiles in fish. Wyoming. Wyoming crocodiles.
Yeah, there are fossil palms. So this area was much warmer, and it was also wetter, much wetter during the Eocene period of time. And it
could
was
hardly get any drier, could it?
Yeah, it was internally drained. And nowadays we've had a lot of uplift that's gone on. And the other thing is that the water has drained off and the climate has cooled down. It's desert now. So
yeah, but it's full of fish fossils and turtles and crocodiles, because that's what you expect out of Wyoming, right?
Yeah. So it was a very different landscape back then during the Eocene. They call it the greenhouse world. The climate was much warmer. In fact, during the last 65 million years, it was the warmest that the planet had been. It was you had no sea ice in the Arctic, and Antarctica was ice-free, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is.
And so this area of Wyoming was wet. It was warm. It kind of looked a little bit like Louisiana or the Delta, Florida. It had a lot of the same sorts of animals that live in even in South America today. And then we also have lots of cool fossils that we find of other mammals that have long gone extinct. So
one of the more interesting ones, I think, is actually named for an area around here, Uinta. Right, can you tell us about Uintatherium?
Yeah, so back in 1870s, there were a number of paleontologists that started working out here. The first of them was a fellow named Joseph Leidy, and he was a surgeon during the Civil War, and he became interested in paleontology and got hooked up with some of the surveys that were being sent out to this area to map the rock layers. And one of them was the Hayden Survey, and the Hayden Survey was coming across, mostly working with the railways that were going to be built, figuring out the different types of rocks, looking for coal and stuff. And they stumbled upon a lot of fossils, and these fossils would be sent back to Philadelphia, where the University of Pennsylvania, where Joseph Leidy was teaching. He got excited, hopped on a train with his wife, and came out here in 1868. and they spent some time looking for fossils, and he was the first to find and name Uintatherium. And he named it Uintatherium based on the Uinta Mountains, which was the mountain range to the south. And he named it, and in the early spring, but also 2 other paleontologists came out around the same time, and that was Marsh, O.C. Marsh. O.C. Marsh was a professor at Yale University at the Peabody Museum. He brought a bunch of students out in kind of around that same time, around 1870, and they actually went through the area we're in. He named this butte that's kind of back behind us, the Big Bone Butte. Today it's known as the Haystacks, and he started finding big bones of this creature that he wanted to name, and so he was scrambling to describe it. He found a complete skeleton, whereas Joseph Leidy just found parts of the skull. And then Edward Drinker Cope was out here the same summer, and he found a skeleton as well, and he wanted to name it something else. But Joseph Leidy got his paper out first, and so we go by the name Uintatherium. And these creatures are rhino to elephant size mammals. They were the first really large mammals to appear after the extinction of the dinosaurs. So by the time you get into the Eocene, you start to get rhino size mammals, big mammals.
Something almost as big as an elephant, but bigger than a rhino.
Yeah, they were big, and they had huge,
I would have named
pelvises.
it, on myself, if I had the opportunity to have named this animal, I would have called it Fugly Beast. Because imagine something that looks, its body, more than anything else, looks like a rhino. Was it a meridiungulate? I forget how many toes it has.
It had 5 toes, but they were
Meridiungulate?
gravioportal, so they look like elephant toes.
Okay.
So their bones get like really kind of crushed, and they have like almost like hooves, like an elephant foot. If you look at an elephant.
All right. So imagine a kind of a lean elephant, but then the head has like 6 plate-like spikes, and then these huge fangs. So this is a rhino-ish monstrosity with saber teeth.
Yeah, so they have big
It's just the
saber
most
teeth.
ridiculously ugly animal.
And they get horns. The early ones didn't have horns, but by this time they had horns.
I saw one of the earliest representations of it. Somebody drew antlers on it. They thought this thing had antlers. Why not? Because it was so ridiculous, right?
Yeah, and actually Cope, in his publication, described them as elephants. He put them in the same group as elephants, and even gave them a trunk. And he said that the sabers were like the ancestor of tusks that you'd see later on in elephants.
Yeah. Well, what do you want? It was the 19th century.
Yeah, and they're really a weird group. They're not extremely common. They occasionally will find them. This is a good area to look for them. We have found a couple feet and some bones of them. There was down south a few years, they were doing a pipeline, and they found a really beautiful skull that's been described. So occasionally they find some good material of these, and these things are not related to anything living today. So based on sort of the phylogeny and trying to figure out who they're related to of living mammals, they appear to be related to some of these early Paleocene South American mammals that they were never very diverse in South America, but they appear to have gotten into North America. Uintatheres, there is one group that got into Asia, but they're mostly a North American group. And then they go extinct about midway in the Eocene, and about that time the Brontotheres start really taking off.
Brontotheres. These are, again, rhino-looking things, but instead of having a horn, it has 2 like shovel plates. And Brontotherium means thunder beast.
Yeah.
So that was my favorite Eocene animal when I was a kid. I wanted a thunder beast. I imagined myself riding a thunder beast. What can you tell? I know you've worked in Cretaceous deposit. Do you normally work in the Eocene?
Yeah, I got my start in the Eocene, so I always liked the Eocene. The Eocene's fun to take people out to because you find fossils in the Eocene.
We've definitely been finding fossils.
So the Eocene's just chock full of turtles and crocodiles, and you start finding stuff.
I think I'm looking at a finger bone right there.
Yeah, you start finding bones and everywhere. You look around. And that's what makes the Eocene kind of nice. I've worked in the Paleocene, and it's a little tougher to find fossils in the Paleocene because the mammals that were living at that time were much smaller. So you really have to get down on your hands and knees and look at the ground. There are some bigger mammals, but oftentimes it's trickier to find them. The Cretaceous, and actually Mesozoic is fun to explore because you find dinosaurs. But the one problem about dinosaurs that makes it not as fun is that they're big, and they're, many of them are bigger than these euonythiers. And so when you do find a big, huge sauropod femur, it's it's like a week to get it out of the ground, maybe, and you might need some heavy equipment and stuff. So they're not easy to collect.
We found a scutosaur in South Africa, and it took 4 days of concentrated effort for all of the guys to get that thing out of the ground.
Yeah,
4 days on one fossil.
So you can imagine a sauropod dinosaur is like.
Yeah, because a scutosaur is about. Imagine a turtle without a shell, except it's the size of a cow, and by the way, ugly.
They got the big jugals.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you one other important thing about your world perspective, if you will. I mean, what is the value of learning paleontology, taking students out to fantastic places like the Badlands to study this?
I think it gives you appreciation of like the vastness of time. It's like how an astronomer looks through a telescope and sees the vastness of outer space. Going out and studying paleontology and going on a dig, you start realizing how vast everything is. It's kind of every year I come out and I look at to the horizon and see how huge this basin is, and then you just imagine all the fossil critters that are hidden away underneath all of this that we're standing on, and you can imagine that there are billions and billions of fossils that are still in the ground waiting to erode out and be exposed to the surface. And what we're seeing is just like a teeny little sliver, whatever gets preserved. And so
most of the area that we've been looking at today has been right around 47 million years old, right? When this, like, the smartest thing on the planet would have been Ida, right?
Yeah,
just
so
about.
some of the primates were pretty smart. You had
well, where I'm going with this is you look at all the time that's gone by, all the beautiful sunsets and brilliant colors and spectacular imagery of just places like this, when there were no people to have that kind of appreciation. We have to accept that there was a really long time of really cool stuff that had nothing to do with us.
Yeah. There was no humans. There was no. There were primates. So there was our.
But at this point, they all look like lemurs, at least in North America.
They were all kind of like lemur or tarsier, like little guys. There were some other weird things that look very strange. It's funny when you talk about these fossils. A lot of times, they're groups that are only known by their scientific names, and they belong to their own kind of groups that have gone extinct. And so it's fun coming out here just to see, like, oh yeah, a lot of these things didn't live when humans were alive, and they're also in a period of time after the extinction of the dinosaurs. A lot of people get confused because you have the age of dinosaurs and then you have the ice ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Eocene and the Paleocene, and to some extent the Oligocene, sit in that zone, which we call the Paleogene, which is after the extinction of the dinosaurs, but the world was still very prehistoric in many, many ways. And so you have the beginnings of a lot of the mammals that we have today, but you also had mixed in there a lot of archaic and strange creatures like euonythiers and some of these animals that are no longer, like brontotheres, are no longer around, and they were all living and very successful during
those bones right there.
A little bone piece right there.
I'm seeing fragments.
Yeah, there's little bits of fragments of bone. You start looking down on the surface. That's why I love the Eocene. I was doing with the student once. We were measuring a section between the Cretaceous and then there's the Eocene. And what we mean by measuring a section is that you basically are measuring the thickness of the layers of the rock, and then you're documenting what observations you see as you measure that thickness of those layers. And we're finding dinosaurs, and then we jump up to the Eocene, and out pops like all these little mammal teeth. And we're like, we're in the Eocene, and so you can tell exactly where that horizon is.
What I've noticed on this expedition is where we will traverse a great deal looking looking for something that catches our eye. But if we have to get down and look at one thing and it turns out not to be what we thought, an inch away from it, there is something.
Yeah, oftentimes you find stuff, you kind of get down on your hands and knees and start finding stuff.
And there it is.
Yeah.
I went on one, at the first paleo dig I went to at all, I got soil samples from a Cretaceous beach. And I took the soil samples back to the lab and was able to sort them out and search through the microscope to see what other fossils were in literally every handful of dirt.
Yeah.
I found shark's teeth, and I found, I forget all the species, but there was a whole lot of things we don't have anymore. Microfossils.
Yeah.
It just in a little pile of dirt.
Yeah.
And brilliant. The number of fossils that I had in literally a handful of dirt was impressive just in itself. So you walk over stuff all the time and not realize what it is.
Yeah, you always come back to a place and you still find more stuff. I'm actually surprised coming out here because I haven't been out here in a couple years, and so just the amount of erosion that's happened since I was last out here is pretty impressive. So new stuff gets exposed all the time, and you can come out and find new things. It's fun. You never know what you're going to find. Sometimes you go out and you don't find much, and then other days you come out and you find something amazing.
Speaking of really, really amazing, this trip so far has been really, really amazing. I've enjoyed the hell out of it, and I want to thank you for letting us know that we're going to be doing this expedition so we can come along. Much appreciated. Okay, so we have down here exploded turtle shell. I think everybody can see that pretty well.
Yeah, so this is another turtle fossil. There's quite a few. So this top part here is the carapace, the top shell. This is the plaster on the bottom shell here. And you can see that's eroding. So half of it's still in the rock. The rest is eroding down here. So here's a piece of that carapace. This is the part of the carapace as well. It's a big turtle.
Again, if you want to find these things in the field, it takes a carefully trained eye. Like, look at these. Look at this. This. See, these are all fragments. They're all broken off. Some of this is bone. Some of this is scutes, either from the inside of a particular turtle shell from the Eocene, or some of them are crocodilian scutes, which are both kind of funny because we're in Wyoming. But yeah, this is what it looks like as it begins to erode out. You see, this is fossil bone here. Almost certainly a turtle shell, because there's nothing but turtle shell around this area, and that is what I suspect this is also, but I haven't broken that out yet. Let me see. Yeah, evidently another bit of turtle shell. Not of much use to us, unfortunately, because mountains are made of them. I found these pieces of turtle shell right there, and they are way the hell up here. You can't even tell how high we are, but I'm having some trouble breathing. I got some altitude for this to be a turtle that died along a shoreline. There's a little bit more of it down there, looks like. I got to within a few yards of the top, but I wish this camera had depth perception. So you'd know how far away everything is and how high up we are at this moment. Let's see, I want to go over this ridge. I can't go up there, that's too steep. I'd like to go over this ridge because I want to explore that other side, and I know that the vehicle is over there. I went all the way through here, and most of this is impassable. And very treacherous. But I can't get across this ridge because this right here is too steep. I will go plummeting down there if I take that way. I can take this way, but then I gotta climb back up that. And it's so tempting because this is right here. But if I slip up right there, I'll end up down there. Well, I took the safer route down, and that wasn't really safe either. Now, I just got to climb back up that. Okay. There we are. And there's the vehicle.
I wish the wind would kick up more.
And there's Benjamin Berger. Now here's actual bone. I found lots of little pieces of this, unfortunately. And some of these may well be the same bone, but they're so very fragmented. Like that's what, see if I can get my hammer out. That is what this guy is, I'm sure. Let's see if I can break that out. See, but badly eroded. Even before it was fossilized, this was already eroded. So again, like some of the other examples we've seen, this was already being scavenged before it was fossilized. And the way that it's all torn apart, there's no way going to be, I won't be able to, collect the whole bone, much less the whole animal. One of the frustrations in paleontology is that these are modern bones. These are not fossils. But as you can see, there's not an articulated skeleton here. We just find bleached bits of white bone. And here's another one over here. There's another one over there. And these are all probably from the same animal being torn apart by coyotes or what have you. I can see a few more over there. And these may well be the same individual. But then some of these bones I had to dig out of the ground because they were in the process of being buried. So if some of these were to become fossils eventually, they would be disarticulated, and some future paleo guy would frustratingly maybe find that, and that'd be all there was, and there wouldn't be anything else. I think we mentioned the reason that there are so many turtles and crocodilians and all that is because this vast arid desert was once upon a time a lake, and all of this has eroded, and what was the lake bottom was certainly much higher than it is now, and all of this is eroded away. But when there was a lake here, when it was in a depositional period, you would have occasions when the lake would overflow, when it would effectively flood, and you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 times. This lake is flooded that I can see right here. I can see a 7th layer down there as well. And then in between each of these flood deposits, you have alluvial deposits where more deposition is coming in, this time from the air. So it starts maybe, to try to build up a soil or what have you. And then you'd have another massive flood, which causes these hardened pillows that you can see, these repeating layers. Okay, so we're out in the field, and Bumfuck Wyoming. Where are we?
We're in Wyoming.
I mean, we're in like nowhere land, Wyoming. Where are we?
So
Far south central Wyoming.
Far south central.
South central. The kind of
So when someone says south central, they're not necessarily talking about Los Angeles.
yeah, this is behind us is a big mountain, kind of a hill. That's called Big Bone Butte. It's what
Big
O.C.
Bone Butte.
Marsh named it.
Okay. You're gonna have to speak up a little bit because the camera's way over there.
Yeah, so this area is traversed by paleontologists during the 1870s. They started finding fossils out here, and people have been coming out out here since, finding more fossils.
This is the director of the expedition. This is Dr. Benjamin Berger. Is that the most appropriate title? Or
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And joining with us is also Dave Wilcots.
Right.
And you have a Master of Science in Geology.
Yes,
and
I
you
do.
are okay. Seasoned in geology, with a lot of interest in paleo. We've been having some great conversations over
I
the last
love
couple
paleo,
of
I love geology, and I also love art as well. I do all three.
So, Ben, describe in your own words, if you would, please, the expedition, what we're doing, what we're finding, what we're covering, and that sort of thing.
So we've been coming out here to find Eocene fossils. So Eocene fossils are fossils that are deposited were preserved between about 55 million years ago to about 34 million years ago. And the Eocene's a weird time period in Earth's history because the climate was a lot warmer and it was a lot wetter. So some of the fossils that we've been finding out here we've been finding a lot of fossil turtles, a lot of fossil fish, a lot of crocodiles and alligators.
And if you're not familiar with Wyoming, just looking behind me, you should see that this is not the typical environment you would expect to find
It's
turtles and fish
very
and crocodiles.
We were finding petrified wood today. We find primates. In fact, that's what drives a lot of scientists to come out here is to find primates. So
I think you need to specify, because a lot of people watching this when they primates in Wyoming, and we're talking about 55 million years ago, they're going to be confused. So you have to clarify what you mean.
So there's two types of primates that you find out here. One are called the Adapids. Kind of one of the more common ones is Northarctus, which is a lemur-like primate. So it looked a lot like ring-tailed lemurs today that live in Madagascar.
So in Disney's Dinosaur, that's what those were supposed to be.
Yeah, I think so. They still had long tails. They were classified as strepsirrhine primates. They lived here in North America until you get into the later part of the Eocene, and then they just start petering out. You find a few of them in Texas that hang on towards the end of the Eocene. There's a few oddballs that are found in the Oligocene, but there's some debate of whether they're primates or not because they're only known from jaws. But for the most part, the primates are very abundant in the Eocene, the early Eocene. But the climate starts changing by the end of the Eocene. It starts getting drier and cooler, and you lose a lot of the big forests that these primates were living in.
So what did this semi-arid desert look like in the time that we're talking about?
It's usually classified as like a semi-tropical sort of forest.
So a jungle, essentially.
Mesophysical. Yeah, it would be kind of like...
Welcome to the jungles of Wyoming.
Yeah.
Canopy layer.
Big canopy trees. You can get really big sequoia-like trees that are in the Eocene. So fairly large trees. It would have looked a little bit like southern Louisiana, kind of the bayou, forested for sure. It wouldn't be as jungly as sort of like the middle of the Amazon. We get a lot of the huge amount of biodiversity and really big trees.
So more like Australia.
Yeah, a bit like parts of Australia, parts of probably Central America, that type of But it's weird coming out here in the desert, just imagining that this is covered in forests. And
Yeah. And Dave, what inspired your interest in paleontology? I mean, why are you here?
I met Ben when you were a grad student. Were you a grad student or?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I met you when you were a grad student back in the 1990s, and I was already interested in paleo. Had already been doing some paleo in Wyoming, and then as a few years went by, then I met Ben.
And you're in
right?
Pennsylvania?
I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Now, so
But,
what I
I've
like about both of you guys is both of you dedicate your time to public education of a sort. I mean, you take kids out on fossil hunts, on field trips?
Well, I've done that once. Once or twice. I'm a museum docent at the Academy of Natural Sciences Museum in Philadelphia. So I work out of the dinosaur prep lab, and I talk to children and adults and visitors of the city about dinosaurs, fossils, preservation, geologic time. We discuss any topic related to geobiology, earth history, out of the dinosaur prep lab at the museum.
And Dr. Benjamin Berger here also runs a YouTube channel that provides a lot of first-run information. If you're looking for, if you just Google a specific prehistoric animal name, or
Lots of videos up.
you very often you will get his as the first response. But I mean, I appreciate that. I've seen your educational stuff. I've seen your videos and I've seen his, and I just like that both of you do that, because I mean that's kind of the same thing that I do. I wish I could do more.
I like bringing the science to kids.
Coming out to a place like this, you probably wouldn't see this in some sort of catalog of tourism. Out in the middle of like Wyoming and crawl around on the desert floor and look for fossils.
Well, you know what was not expected about this was that we had a campsite that was being raided in the morning. We were being raided by pronghorns, which are wonderful animals. They're called the American antelope, but they're not an antelope. Guys, tell me, what is a pronghorn?
It's an anacapridae. It's in that
See?
family.
It's an anacapridae.
So instead of a bovid family.
And the funny thing is that the anacapridae, the pronghorns that we have today, are the last living lineage. The fossil record shows that there was a whole lot more, but the fossil record also shows that cheetahs evolved on this continent, not Africa, and that they then moved to Africa. And wasn't that the reason you gave for why these things are so astonishingly fast?
Yeah, that's what scientists have thought, is that they were fast to outrun cheetahs and big cats, that were feeding on them during the Pleistocene. And so today they're still fast.
Yeah, they are.
They just outrun cars and trucks. And
They can do 40, 45 miles an hour, right?
they
Well, so could the wild mustangs that also crashed our camp.
Yeah, there's lots of wild
You
mustangs.
try to imagine you're sleeping in some little tiny dome tent. You have to have a dome tent because the wind here can be vicious. So you're in this little tiny dome tent, and then suddenly you hear the whinnying and the thunderous foot stomps in the middle of the night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. There is a herd of wild mustangs charging through the camp.
This was what, 11:30 at night or something like that?
I don't remember. I didn't check my watch. I thought it was around 3 o'clock in the morning, but that because it seemed really late for me. But it's kind of terrifying. But we didn't see any dangerous animals. I mean, I did see a coyote. We did hear coyotes.
Yeah, I heard them.
The coyotes sounded wonderful. I love hearing their songs and games and laughing, whatever it is that they're doing out there. That's enjoyable. I think the worst thing I encountered was a scorpion that tried to climb into my bag as I was packing up.
Oh, okay.
Lots of
Yeah, if we
scorpions.
could go back to the American cheetah for a minute. I was fortunate enough to speak with Dr. Larry Martin of University of Kansas Museum before he passed away. His opinion was that the American cheetah was a subspecies of cougar that was just sleeker and faster. So there, according to him, not much relationship with the African cheetah. But
Really?
That's kind of what they found with the direwolf. Was some
yeah,
recent stuff with the
yeah,
direwolf.
the direwolf is really a dog and not a wolf.
Yeah,
I
it's
read that
actually
too.
not closely related to wolves.
What?
So
Yeah,
you
again,
gotta
you gotta-
think of cougars not as just Felis concolor, but Felis concolor has other subspecies. The American cheetah was one of them.
And so you're saying that, like when we say that the pronghorn is the American antelope, and it is in fact not an antelope.
Right.
You're saying that the American cheetah is in fact not a cheetah.
It's not a cheetah. It's a cougar.
Okay. So I had read that the cheetah was more closely related to the cougar than it was to the American cats, and that made sense to me. But
No, the American cheetah it's a nice name, but it was a very fast, sleeker cougar.
and when you talk about the dire wolf, there's all kind of mysticism that comes up around dire wolves, and you're saying that the dire wolf is a dog, not a wolf, and that's going to confuse people too, because they think that dog means domestic species like hounds and terriers and that sort of thing being derived from wolves. What people don't realize very often, I find, is that wolves are themselves just one derivation of a larger category of dogs, and that dogs include many different species: the Asian raccoon dog, the African painted dog, the South American bush dog, and the dingo, of course, and that these do not interbreed. These are distinctly different species. And so when you go back into the fossil record, now you come up with stuff with like Hesperocyon, and you come up with like the Borophagines, and the Borophagines are like, what wonderful things! I mean, your dire wolf has no comparison to the Borophagines, like Epicyon. a 6 foot tall bone. It has bone crushing carnassials. It's just a mammoth sized dog. Imagine Cujo in top physical shape for the Olympics. And had never experienced a human being, so has absolutely no doggy, good boy, none of that. It's just predator.
No manners.
Exactly. But that's a little after the Eocene, isn't it?
Yeah. The Eocene, we have kind of carnivores are pretty small during the Eocene for the most part, and the creodonts are bigger, especially oxyhenids like patronymids.
Yeah.
You gotta speak up because that microphone's all the way over there.
Yeah, so we had quite a few bigger carnivorous creatures that are not related to modern carnivorous mammals that we're living. So the Mezzanickids were these big pig-like carnivorous mammals that were out here.
Pig-like, they're gonna think they're pigs. They're gonna confuse that with entelodonts and Andrewsarchus. We try to get an idea.
Mezzanickids were hoofed carnivores, right?
They're hoofed carnivores.
Hoofed carnivores.
What was the Mezzanickids you came here looking for?
It was Mezonics.
Yeah, Mezonics.
I was fortunate enough to find a
Mezonics.
jaw of a Mezonics. And you were there too.
Yeah, so some people would say that it's pig-like. From the fossils, the best that we can tell,
Picture five little hooves instead of 5 claws.
Yeah.
This is 5 little hooves.
It's kind of like a
hooflets.
wolf. It's a wolf in sheep. It's sheep in wolf's clothing. It looks like a wolf, but it has hooves.
Yeah, big long face with lots of sharp teeth.
Yeah.
Too.
And hooflets.
And little hoofs that was running around on it.
Right. Not split hoof, but 5 little hoofs.
It is so frustrating that we have no idea what the coloration was, what the
I'd love to
behaviors
know
were,
that.
what those weird noises are that these animals
Do they have
would make.
manes like lion? Who knows?
And we're only talking about Mezonics. There's one
Bushy
species.
tails?
Mesonickids includes this whole gamut of different species and different sizes. There was another one that you were looking for. I forget the name. What was the one that you brought up that you said it was your bucket list item? You had to find this one.
That was Patriofelis, but that was not a Mezoniccid.
Yeah, but there was another one that was a Mezoniccid because I recognized it when you mentioned it. But anyway.
Oh, well, right. Harpagolastes.
There, that's the one.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the
that's a
one.
big one.
So again, this is like if sheep ate meat exclusively and looked evil. But then it's not an artiodactyl, it's close to that. I had so much fun geeking out with you guys on this trip, just having our extremely nerdy conversations, all of which I wish were recorded, because I thought they were all, for me, they're kind of golden. I'm talking with people who know all of these ridiculous words that I don't have to explain to anybody. And now when you say that because I have the camera on, I have to explain to the camera what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, it's hard, especially in the Cenozoic, because a lot of the dinosaurs are well known. All the dinosaur names are well known, but the Eocene creatures, which some of them are equally as terrifying and cool, you always have to explain it to people, and people kind of give you a strange look when you explain these.
Oh, I got a great example of that. I think most of us have seen renderings of Brontotherium, Thunder Beast, which is just sounds like the baddest animal, right? It has like two big shovel blades
horns
instead of a rhino horn, and it's not a rhino either. It's a horse. It's just a rhinoceros physique horse, which makes no sense at all. But there was another one which would confuse a lot of people: the gracile rhinos. Like my wife found the ankle for one of these gracile rhinos. Just imagine. You find out that horses and rhinos are very closely related. That doesn't make any sense because when you look at the two in their modern incarnation, they look very different. But if you see a gracile rhino, damned if that doesn't look like a horse.
Yeah, they do. And it's interesting. I did a little reconstruction once, and I posted it on Twitter, and a bunch of people are like, "That looks like a little pony," and I was like, "But that's a rhino." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're really interesting because they're like little ponies, you know, but rhinos."
It's very rare to see other people.
I know,
out
like
but back in the early Eocene, rhinos, horses, and tapirs look pretty much the same, don't they?
Yeah.
In the early Eocene.
They do. During this period of time, especially in the Bergerian, you get kind of a split between three types of rhinos. You get the running rhinos, like
High speed, limber, gracile.
kind of like a horse, but imagine it's slender rhino. And then you had they were pony size.
Imagine what the rodeos would look like.
You're right, if you
We still had some.
It wouldn't be a rodeo, be a rhino race. Instead of dog racing, be a rhino race because they were fast.
Look, we put saddles on Mustangs. Wouldn't it be better? I mean, the Titan, the Thunder Beast, Brontotherium.
Brontotherium came in the Oligocene.
This is what happens. Maybe you ever seen the comparison between like a soccer player and a rugby player?
Yeah.
That's the horse and the Thunder Beast. Imagine putting a saddle on that bitch. That would be cool.
They have like these like sort of saddle-shaped heads, especially the Brontotheres.
Yeah.
And it'd be a great saddle. You could put it right on their skulls and ride them and hold on to their horns.
So it has been a fun trip. I really like the Badlands. I mean, I'm so impressed with the rock formations that we saw. It's gorgeous. The altitude is enough to kill me.
What are we, 7,000 feet?
7,000,
Yeah.
7,000, 8,000 feet.
Yeah, and that's just up. Now look at how far out we are, because it took me a half a tank of gas to get here. To get to nowhere.
Yeah, you have to watch because there aren't very many gas stations between different areas, so you have to kind of be careful.
All right, so I'm going to close this up with a simple question for both of you guys. You're paleontologists, you're geologists, you're both into education, you're both together on this, you're doing this kind of thing, which I think is so much fun. I found a whole lot of fossils. I didn't find any good ones. I found over 100 fossils. My wife found some good ones.
I think she must have.
I was finding fossils everywhere. They were just, oh look, another turtle.
Yeah.
So just give a plug about why teach paleontology. I mean, you bring students out to these things, you know, and we have students outside camera right now. Tell to my audience, you know, why we learn paleontology.
Well, here's some of the reasons to answer that question. We need to know how life progressed through the Earth's history. Like you were saying before, Wyoming wasn't always like this. So paleontology is the science of studying what was here before. How did this place get this way? It was once tropical. Now it's arid. Now it's high altitude. So paleontology is an attempt to answer what happened before and how did it lead up to that. So do we need to know more about Earth history? Certainly we do. But paleontology serves another purpose. What does society really need right now? We need energy engineering. We can't depend on fossil fuels. And we need waste management engineering. As populations grow and industry grows, there's more waste to handle.
Oh, we can depend on fossil fuels right until we run out.
Yeah. Right, but who are the people that are going to fill those energy engineering and waste management engineering positions to sustain our society?
Somebody that has a clue about
somebody that understands science. And how do you get young people into science, into STEM? Paleontology is a gateway science that gets young people, I mean as young as kindergarten, into science. When I was 4, I grew up in Philadelphia. When I was 4, my parents drove to New York City and took me to the American Museum of Natural History there, and I saw the big brontosaurus mount there on what was then the Hall of Jurassic Dinosaurs, and I was just transfixed about the size of this animal, all 87 feet or more of it. And I had gone to the zoo as a kid, and I thought giraffes and elephants were the upper size limit for living animals. But to see that full skeleton just transfixed me. And I've been hooked on paleo ever since I was 4.
It's amazing how big things impress people.
Yes.
The way they do. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember watching King Kong, and I watched the guys who shot the stegosaur in King Kong, and it takes them 5 minutes to walk end to end of the thing. But then I go to the American Museum of Natural History, and there's a stegosaur. Actually, this was one in Los Angeles, but they had a stegosaur there. I'm 11 years old, and I am as tall as the back of this thing. So I've been lied to.
One of the things I think Dave mentioned when he was like a kid is he realized that creature was real.
Yes.
Because like there are I mean, today we have CGI. We have so many creatures we can see in movies and stuff. They're make believe. But when you see a dinosaur, you go, this thing actually existed. This wasn't somebody's imagination. This is an actual creature that lived. So yeah, I think that's really exciting about it.
You and I are both an example of that, and I think Ben may well be too. I was given a book on dinosaurs when I was in 2nd grade, and that had a cladogram in it, and that was so illustrative, and it involved me.
Yeah.
And so here I am. I'm still pursuing that same thing. You told me a similar story about yourself, except he's way more nerd than I am. I almost had to surrender my nerd card to this guy. But how about you, Ben? How did you get started in this?
I fell in love with geology first, and I got really, really fascinated with the mineralogy and studying rocks and how they form. And I started finding fossils. I grew up in Colorado, and I started finding fossils of ocean fossils. Fossil clams and oysters and things. And I was like, in the middle of the mountains, we're miles. I had never seen the ocean growing up, and so I was like, how did there used to be an ocean here? So I was really fascinated by that, like Earth's history. And when I was in 7th grade, I kind of finally said, I want to do paleontology instead of just straight geology. I want to do paleontology. And so that's kind of how I fell into paleontology. So that's how I fell in love with paleontology, was actually just going out and finding fossils myself. Like finding, a lot of invertebrate fossils, like clams. And I remember finding Iceramus, which is a Cretaceous, kind of clam.
Saw them in grad school.
Yeah. There's a lot of them. And I was like, I'm in the middle of the mountains. Like, I've never seen the ocean. How did this thing get here? Hearing people say, well, this used to be underneath the ocean. So I was quite fascinated with the changing landscape of how things change. And I'm still blown away. Like, come out here and find fossils of these animals that once lived here, and the landscape today is totally different. So it tells us a lot about the history of the Earth and how it can change. Like, I think studying paleontology teaches you a lot about the tolerance of Earth's ability to handle changes to its climate and to its animals and plants, and how very versatile the Earth is in terms of being able to weather these major mass extinctions and cataclysms that have happened in the past. And we're still here today, which to me is cool.
For my own part of this, it's challenging conditions. You have to know a hell of a lot about anatomy. You have to know a hell of a lot about the geohistory of the Earth to understand what you're looking at. You have to look at geologic maps that tell you where you are chronologically, in the history of all time on this. And then you have to suffer through these incredible conditions, because sometimes it's really, really hot and it's really, really dry, and people can die out here. So you have to be an adventurer, outdoorsman, nerd at the same time.
Yeah, there is two types of paleontologists. There's sort of the lab or computer paleontologists that love to go in the literature and describe things in the lab and work in the lab. And then there's the more adventurous paleontologists that love field life too. So just going to really remote places or strange places and looking for fossils.
Discover new stuff.
Yeah.